as a blend of microcomputer and software. They dropped the hyphen a year later. Not really that important, but somewhat interesting. He had, while developing BASIC, he kind of ran into his first problem, and this was piracy. He was finding out that it was wildly successful. A lot of people were using it, but they weren't making any money. And come to find out that only about 10% of the users actually paid for BASIC. The rest were copying it and getting it elsewhere. So to go against this, Gates wrote an article in a technology journal, and it was basically about how software programs constitute as intellectual property. And he was kind of one of the big push people behind this push, and ended up getting some of the laws that we have today against piracy and against intellectual property. So in this instance, the government played a huge role for Bill Gates and his endeavors. Without that, they probably would have never been in business. Well, after being with MITS contracting with them for a couple of years, things started to go south a little bit. Ed Roberts and Bill Gates both kind of had strong personalities, didn't get along. So they ended up going their separate ways. In fact, Gates and Allen had to sue to retain the rights of their BASIC machine, or the BASIC operating system. And now with no ties to MITS or New Mexico, they ended up moving the company back to Washington, closer to his hometown and closer to his family. While this was all going down between MITS and Microsoft, there really began to be a shift in the computer market. Prior to that, it was largely big mainframe computers. IBM was essentially the player in computers. But IBM, it's a large company, nothing happens overnight with them. They were behind the 8 ball, and they needed a new operating system for their new PCs. And instead of doing this in-house, which would have taken much longer, they had opted to outsource it to a third party. And this is where Gates' competitiveness and his work ethic really take hold. I guess at a crucial stage during the negotiations, the key contact at Digital Research, was the competition for Microsoft for the IBM deal. The key contact was out of the office, and Gates took full advantage. He viewed vacations as a sign of weakness, and he made sure that IBM noted that as well. And they ended up getting the IBM deal, and they came out with kind of a new version of BASIC, and it was MS-DOS in 1981, and that was able to run on IBM machines, and as well as IBM clones. And one of the entrepreneurial, the entrepreneurial vision that Bill Gates is famous for is his new marketing technique of his new program. He didn't just want to collect royalties from IBM. They licensed it for a one-time fee of $80,000 to IBM. Where they made their money on MS-DOS was licensing it to other companies, and other clones accepting it. And with that, MS-DOS became, eventually, it was just the industry standard. The only other competition was Apple at that time. So after winning the IBM deal, Microsoft was hugely successful. They grossed $2.5 million in 1978 and $32 million in 1982. Then in 1985, they followed up MS-DOS with Windows in 1985. Obviously, everybody knows Windows. And the push here was to make it user-friendly. They enlisted a graphical user interface. There's a mouse. You didn't have to know codes. You could simply move around on the desktop and click on icons. Things that we know and love today. other programs as well. Microsoft Paint, word processor, Notepad, and the control panel were on this original version of Windows. And then, as I'm sure we all know, Microsoft was sued by the United States government. This was maybe an instance where the government played a role that wasn't so helpful for them. They were sued on their business techniques by both the Federal Trade Commission and the Department of Justice. Some of the things that they were doing, they were making their programs only compatible with Microsoft products. They were undermining their competitors who went against them. In 1995, the Department of Justice ruled against collateral or contractual bundling. This was essentially bundling products that were only compatible with Microsoft products. And in 1997, it was actually the Department of Justice ruled against them. They ruled that they were bundling their Internet Explorer and Microsoft Windows. And then to kind of complete his story, he did have a life outside of Microsoft. He met Melinda French. She was a Microsoft employee. They married on January 1, 1994. But sadly, later that same year, Mary Gates, his mother, died of cancer. Kind of in her legacy, they came up with this new foundation. It was kind of the building blocks for what became the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And Bill Gates has been quoted saying, with great wealth comes great responsibility. And in 2008, he stepped down from Microsoft. So I guess the conclusions we can take from his entrepreneurial successes is that he's fiercely competitive. We've seen that several times throughout his life. Wanting to get the IBM deal, challenges for himself, getting all A's, that sort of stuff. Work ethic, trying to come through on the MITS deal after you've made some bold allegations. He had to follow those up with his tremendous work ethic. Government aid, and I called it aid for a reason, because without that first wave of intellectual property rulings, they would have never been in business. Yes, it did hurt them in the 90s with their business practices, but it hurt them, or it helped them a lot more than what it ended up actually hurting them. And then luck, luck plays a role in the IBM deal. The chance that the contact at the other company was at Digital Research was out of the office for a month. The luck in actually getting the program, MS Basic, to work without even really testing it, and that's about it.